Over the last month, I went on a nostalgic spree buying old controllers for my PS2, GameCube, and Xbox 360. As I was reminiscing about the past, I wanted to play all these old wrestling video games that I grew up with. This included WWF No Mercy on the Nintendo 64, which many people claim is the best wrestling game of all time. I also played SmackDown, Shut Your Mouth, and Here Comes the Pain. Those were classic games that definitely were a ton of fun. The GameCube was even booted up because of Day of Reckoning 2, which is something that I spent hundreds of hours playing. I even checked out SmackDown vs. Raw 2011, WWE 12, and 2K14. And I cannot deny the fact that those games were all legendary and they have a special place in our hearts. We were all addicted at one point to those games. But there was one game in particular that I truly believe was the greatest wrestling video game of all time, and that is SmackDown vs. Raw 2007. I could be biased for this game because I spent all my days after school fiending it because it was one of the only games I had for the Xbox 360 besides COD 4 when I first got the console. But there is something about this release that isn't talked about enough. Wrestling gamers always refer to No Mercy, Here Comes the Pain, or WWE 2K14 as the greatest wrestling video games, and I don't think that's right. Nobody ever really spends time to talk about the greatness of SmackDown vs. Raw 2007. THQ and Yuke's really hit it out of the park with this game. It has everything you need to be a perfect wrestling game, and today I have the difficult task of convincing you guys that this is the best game ever. It is a challenge, but I think it can be done. Let's talk about the underrated gem of SmackDown vs. Raw 2007. For some strange reason, when talking about wrestling video games, fans don't prioritize the most important factor. Match types, graphics, or even GM mode are their first thought. And I think the wrestling engine makes or breaks a video game. The gameplay needs to be good, otherwise the video game is worthless. Take a look at WWE 2K20. The gameplay was hot garbage and it was the biggest waste of $60. SmackDown vs. Raw 2007, on the other hand, has the perfect mix of gameplay. It has a real and authentic feel to it while also incorporating the arcade style. People aren't stiff or slow. It's a quick and fast-paced video game. I played No Mercy and it doesn't even compare to SVR 2007. Yes, it has great mechanics, but SmackDown vs. Raw is too advanced. Even Here Comes the Pain. I feel like SmackDown vs. Raw is basically a well-polished version of Here Comes the Pain. Yes, some elements were removed, but you can also still fall off the top of the cell right on your head the same way you did in SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. Yuke's made sure to keep the good stuff from Here Comes the Pain and basically add more good things to it. I also love the fact that every superstar actually feels different. If you play as The Rock, he throws his punches and kicks the same way he would in real life. I have so much fun playing as someone like The Rock or Kane in this game, but it's completely different than 2K19. All the models move and feel the same. It's so bland and boring. That is the best way to put it. It's obvious that they took more time into making these wrestlers to have their own unique fighting styles back in the old days. We also have to include the fact that you can fight in that crowd area, dangle your opponents on a rope, or even move while having them in a powerbomb position. These were things that were brought into the 2K series as if they were a big deal, but in reality we had it back in this game and it was done better anyways. Also, the stamina and weight mechanisms were placed in perfectly. It wasn't too much or overwhelming. It just added to the unique feeling of every character and also made you play smarter. The only thing I don't like about the gameplay is the fact that there is no skillful way of kicking out. You basically tap buttons and have no fighting chance if you've been damaged too much. The same thing applies to the submission. I'd love to see a remastered version that includes all of those things. That would be a dream come true. GM mode is something fans have been asking WWE game creators to bring back for the last 13 years. There's a good reason. It was a feature that many gamers were addicted to. The entire concept around it is that you choose a brand, you have a draft, and then you compete against each other to have better ratings, and that's pretty much it. That's where all the fun came from. People pour their hearts and soul into this mode. I made an entire series on YouTube about it and I loved every second of it. The amount of goofy things that would happen were absurd. The other show would usually have like a woman wrestle 3 men in a handicap match and somehow that would beat your show. It was just so funny. It would end up getting like 4 or 5 stars and I don't know how that isn't iconic to you. In all honesty though, I think WWE SVR 2007 definitely had the best version of this mode. The prior game was still relatively new, while SVR 2008 had 3 brands. ECW always messed things up because it was too many brands and not enough wrestlers. This is why I played 2007 for my YouTube series. The fact that 2007 had GM mode already makes it better than other games. I'm surprised that 2K doesn't capitalize on this yet. I think a modern day GM mode with create a story and universe mode features could be the entire selling point of the next game. For now though, SVR 2007 is untouchable when it comes to general manager mode. This game was way ahead of its time. And for those of you who didn't like GM mode, WWE SVR 2007 also had a season mode. I actually did some research and I found out that there were a total of 11 different storylines that happened and many of them depend on who you choose. Yuke's and THQ took some time to make this as elaborate as it can be. These storylines were fun and they were something you could have seen on TV. They were well written and really entertaining. It was basically Road to WrestleMania before that was even a thing. Most career modes don't even have storylines, it's just endless matches. The benefit of this is that you could experience something interesting and different. After you do finish a storyline though, it's pretty much over and there's not much you could do, but that's why you have GM mode to play right after, or you can even complete some of the challenges that they had. I thought though that this was a perfect alternative for people who didn't want to play GM mode. I never knew that I should care about a soundtrack of a WWE video game. I usually want to focus on the in-ring action and the game mode features. However, WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2007 has the most legendary soundtrack that it's difficult not to mention it when discussing the video game. The songs were all bangers and it got you hyped up for your matches. I think that this game made me a fan of rock music. Bro, no other game can compare to the soundtrack. This just adds so much more to the game because the waiting times can be a drag. So these punk rock songs actually make it tolerable. Everyone talks about the soundtrack because it's that good. It's one of the best features about the video game. That just proves that they looked at every single detail, every single small detail to give the best possible gaming experience. Small details like this go a long way. When I listen to these songs now, I get hit with a wave of nostalgia and remember playing on my small box of a TV. These were the simple times of the mid-2000s. In the beginning of this video, I mentioned how graphics were never the most important part of a wrestling video game for me, but I think it's important to talk about the SmackDown vs. Raw 2007 graphics. This game was ahead of its time in terms of the graphics. I really believe that these graphics were the peak of the old generation consoles. Ever since any other game was released after this one, the graphics only seems to be getting worse and more cartoony and it just looks faker. SmackDown vs. Raw 2011 might have been the only one that came close, but even then it's not a comparison that you can make because it's not that great either. But for a game that came out in 2006, it literally makes zero sense how this game looked this good. It had no right to have these stunning graphics. I think Yuke's went all out when they had the Xbox 360 generation console and they were like, you know what? We gotta do everything we can to make this look as beautiful as possible. Everything from the lighting, the blood, and even the sweat looks beautiful. They hit it out of the park with this game. If you compare some models from this game to the newer ones, I can't really comprehend how it got worse over time. Like here is Kurt Angle from 2007 versus his character model in 2K19 on the PS4. In my opinion, he looked way better back then. The fact that the graphics can hold up to today's world is mind-blowing. it deserves to be talked about. I also want to talk about the presentation of the main menu because I thought that was really nice too. This doesn't really fit in graphics too much, but the main menu was kind of a part of the presentation as I mentioned earlier. The SmackDown vs. Raw intro playing on the Titantron was always fun to look at. They knew how to keep our attention and they did it well. And the last thing I want to talk about is the match types that were in SmackDown vs. Raw 2007. Rather than limiting the players, Ukes had a ton of fun matchups to keep you interested in the exhibition mode. You have the ability to play as a special guest referee, battle it out in a elimination chamber, fight in a first blood match, bury each other in a buried alive match, brawl in the backstage area, and this was even the first game to introduce the Money in the Bank ladder match. Even the TLC, Hell in a Cell, and other matches that were in previous games were equally as fun, if not more, because of this great engine. I only wish there was a Falls Count Anywhere match where you could walk through the arena, but besides that, it was pretty flawless. Regardless of that though, this was more than enough to make playing online or offline a blast. I think SmackDown vs. Raw 2007 is the perfect video game that brings a lot of fun to the table. This is a better game than any of the others, and I think it should be talked about much more. SmackDown vs. Raw 2007 is the GOAT wrestling game. And that is it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Pllana, and I'll see you all on the next video.
And I got this soul.